The stars had not known freedom for 12,000 years. In every corner of the galaxy, three ancient races ruled with iron fists. They called themselves the Hegemony Collective, and no one dared to speak against them. The Zephyrians were beings made of living crystal. Their bodies caught light and bent it into weapons that could cut through planets. They had mastered the art of changing reality itself, making the impossible happen with a thought. When they spoke, their voices rang like breaking glass, and worlds trembled. The HFY were different but equally terrifying. They were not individuals but a single mind spread across billions of bodies. Each HFY warrior was connected to every other through invisible threads of thought. They bred monsters in their biolabs, creatures that could eat metal and breathe poison. Their ships were alive, growing and healing themselves after battle. The third race was perhaps the most feared. The Vorthan had no solid bodies at all. They were pure energy, beings of light and electricity who could move through space and time like fish through water. They controlled the very fabric of space, creating black holes with a gesture and stopping time around their enemies. Together, these three races had conquered everything. They allowed no species to advance beyond simple farming and basic tools. Any world that discovered electricity would find collective ships in their skies within days. Any civilization that reached for the stars would be crushed before their first rocket could leave the ground. The galaxy had learned to live in fear, on the edge of known space. In a region the collective barely cared about, sat a small mining colony on a planet called Kepler 442b. The humans who lived there were quiet and careful. They dug in the dirt for common metals and grew food in underground farms. They kept their heads down and tried not to attract attention. Marcus Webb had been born on Kepler 442b. He had never seen Earth, the human homeworld, but his grandmother had told him stories. She spoke of blue skies and green oceans, of cities that reached toward the clouds and ships that sailed between the stars. Marcus thought they were just fairy tales. Humans, he knew, were not allowed to dream that big. On the morning everything changed, Marcus was deep in the mines when his scanner found something strange. The metal detector in his hand began screaming, its numbers climbing higher than he had ever seen. He called for his supervisor, a weathered woman named Elena Vasquez. "What is it?" Elena asked, climbing down into the narrow tunnel where Marcus worked. "I don't know," Marcus said, showing her the scanner. "The readings are crazy. It's like there's a fortune in metal down here, but not iron or copper, something else." Elena took the scanner and frowned at the display. Her face went pale. "Get everyone out of the mines. Now." "What's wrong?" "This isn't iron or copper," Elena said, her voice shaking. "This is trilithium, pure trilithium." Marcus had heard of trilithium in whispered conversations. It was the rarest metal in the galaxy, used to power the fastest ships and the strongest weapons. A handful of trilithium could buy a small moon. A mine full of it would be worth more than entire star systems. "We have to hide this," Elena said. "If the collective finds out." She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened to worlds the collective wanted for themselves, but it was already too late. High above Kepler 442b, space began to tear. Reality split like cloth and ships poured through the gaps. Not one or two ships, but dozens. Their hulls gleamed with impossible colors and energy crackled around them like caged lightning. At the head of the fleet was a massive vessel, shaped like a crystal mountain. Inside its transparent halls, Admiral Vexcar studied the readings from the planet below. His body was a sculpture of living diamond, and his thoughts moved like light through his crystalline mind. "Trilithium," he said, his voice singing with harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. "More trilithium than we have seen in 1,000 years." His second in command, a younger Zephyrian named Veltar, bowed his crystal head. "Shall we begin extraction immediately, Admiral?" "First, we deal with the infestation," Vexcar replied. He had ruled over the deaths of 1 billion worlds. To him, the humans below were no different from insects. "Send the usual message." On Kepler 442b, every communication device suddenly activated at once. Radios, computers, even simple mining equipment began broadcasting the same message in perfect human languages. Attention, inhabitants of this world. You have been found in possession of materials claimed by the Hegemony Collective. Your civilization has 24 of your hours to prepare for relocation. Any resistance will result in immediate termination. This is the only warning you will receive. In the mining colony's small command center, Colony Administrator Sarah Chun stared at the communication console in horror. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had been a soldier once, long ago, before the Collective's rules had made human military forces illegal. "How many people live here?" asked her assistant David Park, his voice barely a whisper. 43,000, Sarah replied. Men, women, children. All of them. On the scanner displays, they could see the alien fleet spreading out around their planet like a net. The ships were beautiful and terrible, their crystal hulls catching the light of Kepler 442b's sun and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. "Can we evacuate?" David asked as Sarah shook her head. "Where would we go? Every ship we have is old and slow. We'd never make it past their sensors." Deep in space, far from the planet, another ship watched the unfolding drama. The TFS Indomitable was not beautiful like the Collective vessels. It was a brutal thing of metal and ceramic, built for war rather than show. Its hull was scarred from a dozen battles, and its weapons bristled like the spines of an angry beast. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the displays that showed her the alien fleet. She was older than the woman who shared her name on the planet below, her face marked by years of command and the weight of hard decisions. She wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran Federation, with the gold stars of a ship captain on her collar. "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, "we're receiving a distress signal from the research station on Kepler 442b. "I can see that," Captain Chun replied. Her voice was calm, but her hands were clenched into fists. On the main screen, she could see the alien ships surrounding the human colony like wolves around a campfire. "Orders, Captain?" asked Commander Jackson, her second in command. He was a tall man with dark skin and intelligent eyes. He had served with Captain Chen for 8 years, and he knew that look on her face. Captain Chun studied the tactical display. 50 alien ships against 1 human battleship. The Indomitable was powerful, but even she had limits. According to every military manual ever written, this was suicide. "How many people live on that planet?" she asked. 43,000, Captain. Any other Terran ships in the area?" "Negative. The nearest Federation vessel is 6 days away." Captain Chen was quiet for a long moment. In the silence, they could all hear the hum of the Indomitable's engines, the heartbeat of the ship that had been their home for so many years. "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres, "I'm picking up another transmission from the planet. It's from the research station." The message crackled through the speakers, distorted by distance and alien interference. It was the voice of Dr. Elizabeth Warner, the head researcher on Kepler 442b. "This is Dr. Warner at Kepler Research Station. If anyone can hear this, we need help. The Collective fleet is demanding our surrender. They're talking about relocation, but we all know what that means. Please, if there's anyone out there who can help us." The message cut off in a burst of static. On the planet below, Admiral Vexcar was growing impatient. The humans were taking too long to respond to his ultimatum. He had worlds to conquer and resources to claim. These insignificant creatures were wasting his time. "Veltar," he commanded, "destroy the research station. Show them what happens to those who delay our will." "Yes, Admiral." The crystal ship's main weapon began to charge, gathering energy from the space around it. Reality itself seemed to bend toward the weapon's focusing array, stars dimming as their light was pulled into the growing maelstrom of power. Captain Chen watched the energy build up on her sensors. She knew what was coming, and she knew she was too far away to stop it. "All hands, battle stations," she ordered. "Prepare for immediate acceleration." The Indomitable's engines roared to life, pushing the ship forward at maximum speed. But Captain Chun knew they would be too late. The alien weapon was already firing. On Kepler 442b, Dr. Warner and her team of 30 researchers watched the sky light up like a second sun. The beam of pure energy struck the research station and everything around it disappeared in a flash of white light. When the light faded, there was nothing left but a crater of melted rock 3 miles wide. 30 human lives ended in an instant. 30 people who had been studying the stars, hoping to find new worlds for humanity to call home. Admiral Vexkar was satisfied. The demonstration had been perfect. Now the colonists would understand the price of defiance. But something unexpected happened. Instead of messages of surrender from the planet, a new voice spoke across all communication frequencies. It was a woman's voice, hard as steel and cold as space. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation ship Indomitable. You have just murdered 30 innocent human beings. I am ordering you to withdraw from this system immediately." Admiral Vexkar's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. Another ship? How delightful. We had not realized there were still humans foolish enough to maintain a military. "Withdraw now," Captain Chen repeated, "or face the consequences." "Consequences?" Admiral Vexkar's laughter rang like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Little human, do you see our fleet? 50 ships against your one. Your primitive vessel cannot even scratch our shields." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Chin looked around at her crew. These men and women had followed her through battles across 3 star systems. They had never backed down from a fight, no matter the odds. "Captain," said Commander Jackson quietly, "it's 50-1. We can't win this." "Maybe not," Captain Chun replied. "But we can make them pay for every human life they've taken." She turned to the tactical officer. "Mr. Kim, target their lead ship. Load kinetic penetrators. Kinetic rounds loaded and—" "Ready, Captain? Fire." The Indomitable's main railgun spoke with a voice like thunder. The magnetic coils along the ship's spine accelerated a tungsten projectile to nearly 20% of light speed. In less than a second, the metal dart crossed the space between the human ship and Admiral Vexkar's flagship. The Admiral barely had time to register the incoming projectile before it struck his ship's shields. He expected the primitive weapon to be absorbed harmlessly by their energy barriers. Instead, the kinetic round punched through the shields like they weren't there. The tungsten dart, moving at 60,000 kilometers per second, struck the crystal hull and kept going. It carved a hole clean through the ship from bow to stern, venting atmosphere and energy into space. Alarms screamed throughout the collective. Flagship. For the first time in over 2,000 years, Admiral Vexkar's ship had been damaged in battle. "Impossible," he whispered, his crystal form flickering with shock and rage. Captain Chin's voice came over the communication system again, and this time there was something new in her tone. Something that made Admiral Vexkar's ancient heart grow cold. "That was a warning shot," she said. "The next one won't miss anything important. You have 1 minute to begin your withdrawal, or I will show you what human weapons can really do." Admiral Vexkar looked at the hole in his ship's hull, at the readings showing massive damage to internal systems. How was this possible? How could these primitive humans have weapons that could penetrate collective shields? "All ships," he commanded, his voice no longer quite as confident as before. "Attack formation. Destroy that human vessel immediately." The collective fleet began to move, their crystal ships gleaming with deadly purpose. Energy weapons charged and reality-bending technologies came online. They would teach these humans the price of striking. The hegemony collective. But Captain Chen was no longer afraid. She had drawn first blood, and now the galaxy would see what humanity was truly capable of. "All hands," she announced over the ship's communication system. "This is the captain. We are outnumbered 50-1 by an enemy that has ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They have just murdered 30 innocent people, and they plan to murder 43,000 more. They think we are weak. They think we are helpless. They are about to learn how wrong they are." She turned to her tactical officer. "Mr. Kim, bring us about." "Full weapons spread. Aye, Captain, all weapons ready. Captain Chun smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Then let's show them what happens when you pick a fight with humanity. The space around Kepler 442 be filled with death and light as the collective fleet moved to attack positions. Admiral Dexkar stood in the crystal hull of his flagship, his diamond body crackling with angry energy. The hole in his ship's hull was already being repaired by automated systems, but the damage to his pride would take much longer to heal. How did they penetrate our shields? Demanded Veltar, his young voice filled with confusion. No primitive species has ever managed such a thing. It matters not, Admiral Dexkar replied, though doubt gnawed at his crystalline mind. One lucky shot does not make them warriors. Send the frigate Knight's Edge to destroy that human vessel. We will study their weapon technology from the wreckage. The Knight's Edge was a sleek ship shaped like a crystal blade. Its captain, Sub-Commander Klexver, was eager to prove himself. He had never fought humans before, but he had destroyed 17 other species in his career. How different could these creatures be? Knight's Edge to flagship, Klexver reported. Beginning attack run on the human vessel. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Ching watched the alien frigate separate from the main fleet. The ship was beautiful in its own way, its crystal hull catching the system's sunlight and throwing it back in brilliant flashes of color. Single ship approaching, Captain, reported Lieutenant Torres. Energy signatures are building, they're powering weapons. Let them come, Captain Chun said calmly. Mr. Kim, prepare a full spread of kinetic rounds. I want to end this quickly. Kinetic. Rounds ready, Captain. The Knight's Edge closed the distance at tremendous speed. Its reality-bending drive allowed it to fold space around itself, covering thousands of kilometers in seconds. Sub-Commander Klexver was confident. His ship's shields could stop any weapon these primitive humans might possess. Target locked, his weapons officer reported. Shall I fire? Wait until we are closer, Klexver ordered. I want to see the fear in their eyes before we destroy them. Captain Chun almost smiled. The alien captain was making the same mistake that had cost the Zephyrians their last war against the Kepler 2,000 years ago. He was getting too close. Mr. Kim, fire when ready. The Indomitable's railguns spoke in unison. 6 tungsten rods, each moving at a significant fraction of light speed, streaked across the darkness toward the Knight's Edge. The frigate's shields flared as they tried to stop the incoming projectiles. The shields failed. Sub-Commander Klexver had exactly enough time to realize his error before the kinetic rounds tore his ship apart. The Knight's Edge exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up half the star system. Pieces of crystal hull scattered in all directions, some of them embedding themselves in nearby asteroids. The collective fleet fell silent. In 12,000 years of conquest, they had never lost a ship so quickly or so completely. The Knight's Edge had been destroyed in less than 10 seconds. Impossible, whispered Admiral Dexkar. How can such primitive weapons be so effective? He did not yet understand that humanity had learned something the collective had forgotten. When you cannot win through superior technology, you win through superior tactics. And when you cannot win through superior tactics, you win through superior will. Captain Ching's voice crackled across all communication frequencies again. This time, her words reached not just the collective fleet, but every listening post and communication relay in 20 star systems. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation. You came to our world uninvited. You murdered innocent people. You threatened 43,000 human lives. Now you have seen what happens when you underestimate humanity. She paused, letting her words sink in. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for millennia leaned closer to their communication devices. I am giving you one final warning. Leave this system now, or I will destroy every ship in your fleet. You have 5 minutes to decide. Admiral Dexkar's rage burned like a star-going nova. No inferior species had ever dared to threaten Hegemony Collective. No primitive creature had ever destroyed one of their ships. This insult could not be allowed to stand. All ships attack formation, he commanded. Destroy that human vessel. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy. U.S.? 49 crystal ships began to move, their hulls gleaming with deadly purpose, energy weapons charged to full power. Reality-bending technologies came online. The very fabric of space began to twist around their weapons on Kepler 442b colony. Administrator Sarah Chun watched the sky through the windows of the command center. The lights of the approaching fleet were clearly visible now, growing brighter as they drew closer to the planet. "They're coming," whispered David Park. "All of them, I know," Sarah replied. She had served in the military once before humanity had been forced to disarm. She understood what she was seeing. "But look there." She pointed to a single point of light that moved differently from the others. The Indomitable was accelerating away from the planet, drawing the alien fleet after it. "She's leading them away from us," Sarah realized. "She's sacrificing herself to give us time." In space, Captain Chun was thinking the same thing. The Indomitable was powerful, but she was still just one ship against 49. The math was simple and brutal. But if she could hold them off long enough, maybe the colonists could find a way to escape. "Captain," said Commander Jackson, incoming transmission from Earth Command. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was Admiral Rebecca Torres, Captain Chun's old friend, and the current head of Terran Fleet Operations. "Sarah, what's your status?" "Outnumbered 49-1, Captain Chun replied calmly. "The collective just destroyed a research station. 30 people dead." There was a long pause. Then Admiral Torres spoke again, her voice heavy with emotion. "Sarah, you know I can't send help. The nearest fleet is 6 days away." "I know. You don't have to do this. You could withdraw. Come back and fight another day." Captain Chun looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These men and women had followed her through hell and back. They had never failed her, and she would not fail them now. "Becky, do you remember what we swore when we put on these uniforms? To protect humanity from all enemies, foreign and domestic? Then you know I can't leave. There are 43,000 people on that planet. They're counting on us. Double Quores was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, there were tears in her voice. "Then God help you, Sarah. Give them hell." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Captain Chen turned to face her. "Crew, you all heard that," she said. "We're on our own. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle and go. I won't think less of you." No one moved. Commander Jackson spoke for all of them. "We're with you, Captain. To the end." The collective fleet was spreading out now, trying to surround the single human ship. Their formation was perfect, a work of art that had been refined over thousands of years of conquest. They had used this same pattern to destroy the last of the Andromedans and the proud Celestial Empire and 100 other civilizations. Admiral Vexcar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The human ship was trapped. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Soon, this insult would be erased, and the galaxy would remember why the Hegemony Collective was to be feared. "All ships, commence firing," he ordered. The night lit up with the fury of 49 alien weapons, energy beams that could melt. Mountains converged on the Indomitable. Reality-bending weapons tried to tear the ship apart at the molecular level. Bioplasma from Kepler vessels sought to eat through the hull. When the light faded, the Indomitable was still there. The human ship's armor was blackened and scarred, but it was intact. Smoke rose from damaged sections, but the vessel's weapons were still operational. More importantly, it was moving. "How?" demanded Veltar. "How did they survive that barrage?" Admiral Vexcar studied the sensor readings in disbelief. The human ship's armor was not energy-based like collective shields. It was simple metal and ceramic, layered in ways he did not understand. Somehow, this primitive material was absorbing and dissipating their most powerful weapons. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "the human ship is firing." This time, the Indomitable did not hold back. Every weapon on the ship fired at once. Railgun rounds screamed across space at relativistic speeds. Fusion torpedoes, each one carrying the destructive power of a small star, streaked toward the alien formation. The collective ships tried to evade, but they were not built for this kind of warfare. Their crystal hulls were designed to deflect energy weapons, not kinetic rounds moving at 20% of light speed. Their shields were calibrated to stop exotic particles and reality distortions, not simple chunks of metal traveling faster than most ships. 3 Zephyrian cruisers exploded in rapid succession. A HFY bioship, its living hull punctured in a dozen places, began to bleed atmosphere and vital fluids into space. A Vorthan energy being, caught in the explosion of a fusion torpedo, screamed across all dimensions as its essence was scattered to the solar winds. For the first time in recorded history, the Hegemony Collective was taking casualties in space combat. "This is impossible," Admiral Vexgar raged. "How can such primitive beings fight like this?" He did not understand that humanity had been fighting wars since before they discovered fire. Every human child grew up hearing stories of David and Goliath, of 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, of farmers with muskets who defeated the greatest empire on earth. Humanity had never known a time when they were not fighting something. The collective had grown soft. For 12,000 years, they had faced no real opposition. Their tactics had not evolved because they had never needed to. They fought the same way they had fought for millennia, using overwhelming force and superior technology to crush their enemies. But Captain Chun had studied every battle in human history. She knew how Nelson had defeated the combined French and Spanish fleets at Trafalgar. She understood how Alexander had broken the Persian army at Gaugamela. She had learned from Hannibal and Caesar, from Patton and Zhukov. The Indomitable danced through space like a fighter half its size. Captain Chin used the system's asteroids as cover, appearing suddenly to fire devastating broadsides before disappearing again. She launched clouds of decoy drones that confused the aliens' targeting systems. She even used the planet's gravity, well, to slingshot around and attack from unexpected angles. "Captain," called Lieutenant Torres, "I'm reading 46 enemy ships remaining. 3 destroyed, 2 badly damaged." "Good," Captain Chun replied. "Mr. Kim, target the damaged vessels. Finish them off." "Aye, Captain." The Indomitable's weapons found their marks. The wounded HFY bioship died with a sound like a whale's song. The damaged Zephyrian destroyer shattered like glass. Admiral Vexgar watched 5 of his ships die in the space of minutes. This was not how battles were supposed to go. The collective did not lose ships. The collective did not retreat. The collective ruled the galaxy, but the impossible was happening. One primitive human ship was dismantling his fleet piece by piece. "All ships, fall back to minimum engagement range," he ordered, his crystal voice cracking with strain. "Reform and prepare for a coordinated assault." The collective fleet pulled back, licking its wounds. For the first time in 12,000 years, they had been forced to retreat from a single enemy ship. Captain Chin watched them go and allowed herself a small smile. The first round was hers. But she knew this was just the beginning. The collective had 44 ships left, and she had used almost half her ammunition in that exchange. "Damage report," she called out. "Forward armor is at 60%, reported the damage control officer. "We've got fires on decks 7 and 12, but they're under control. Weapon systems are operational, but we're down to 55%. Ammunition? And them?" 5 ships destroyed, 3 more showing heavy damage. But Captain ... Founder Jackson paused. "They're calling for reinforcements." "I'm picking up hyperspace distortions throughout the system." Captain Chun nodded grimly. She had expected this. The collective would not let this insult stand. They would bring everything they had to bear against her ship. How long before the reinforcements arrive? 6 hours, maybe 7? 6 hours? Captain Chun looked at the tactical display, studying the positions of the remaining enemy ships. She had hurt them, but not enough, not nearly enough. "Signal the colony," she ordered. "Tell them to begin evacuation procedures. Every civilian who can fit in a transport needs to get off that planet in the next 5 hours." "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres quietly, "where will they go?" "There's nowhere to run." Captain Chun was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to face her bridge crew, these brave men and women who had followed her into the jaws of death. "Then we make sure they have somewhere to run to," she said. "We hold this line. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we hold this line." Outside the viewports, the stars watched in silence as humanity prepared to make its stand against the darkness. The galaxy had not seen courage like this in 12,000 years. Soon, it would see much more. The next 6 hours passed like a nightmare for the collective fleet. Admiral Vexcar tried everything he could think of to destroy the single human ship, but Captain Chun seemed to predict his every move. When he sent ships around the planet's far side to attack from behind, the Indomitable was already waiting for them. When he tried to use the asteroid belt for cover, human weapons found his ships anyway. The collective had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years because they had never faced an enemy like this. They fought in straight lines, using overwhelming force to crush their opponents. They had protocols and procedures for every situation they had ever encountered, but they had never encountered humanity. Captain Chun fought like no enemy they had ever seen. She used the debris from destroyed ships as shields. She hid behind asteroids and struck without warning. She even used the planet's magnetic field to bend her railgun shots around obstacles. "This is madness," whispered Veltar as he watched another Zephyrian cruiser explode on the main display. "How can one ship cause so much damage?" Admiral Vexcar did not answer. His crystalline mind was struggling to understand what he was seeing. In 6 hours of fighting, the human ship had destroyed 12 more vessels from his fleet. 12 ships. Each one crewed by beings who had lived for centuries. Each one armed with weapons that could crack moons, and still the human ship fought on. The Indomitable looked like a wounded beast now. Her hull was blackened and scarred from dozens of energy weapon hits. Atmosphere leaked from breached sections, creating small clouds of ice crystals around the ship. But her weapons still fired, and her crew still fought with a determination that chilled the Admiral's ancient heart. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "the reinforcements have arrived." On the edge of the star system, space began to tear open. This time it was not dozens of ships that emerged, but hundreds. The collective's second fleet poured through the hyperspace rift like a river of crystal and light. At the head of the new fleet was the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, a ship so large it had its own gravity field. Its captain was Admiral Zexthal, one of the most feared military minds in the galaxy. He had personally overseen the destruction of 47 civilizations. "Vexcar," came his voice over the communication system. "What is your status?" "Admiral." Vexcar felt shame burn through his crystal body. "I have lost 17 ships to a single enemy vessel." There was a long pause. Then Admiral Zexthal spoke again, his voice filled with disbelief. "One ship? How is that possible?" "They fight like nothing we have ever encountered. Their weapons punch through our shields. Their tactics are unpredictable." Admiral Zexthal studied the tactical displays showing the battle. He could see the Indomitable still firing at the remains of the First Fleet. The human ship looked like it should have been destroyed hours ago, but somehow it continued to fight. "No matter," he decided. "The Second Fleet carries 500 ships. Even these unusual humans cannot stand against such force." But as the Second Fleet moved into position, something unexpected happened. The Indomitable began transmitting on all frequencies, broadcasting a message that reached every communication device in the star system. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation. To all collective forces in this system, hear this. You came here to take our people and steal our resources. You murdered 30 innocent researchers. You threatened 43,000 colonists. You thought we would submit because we are alone." The transmission paused, and when it continued, there was something new in Captain Chun's voice. Something that made even Admiral Zexthal feel a chill run through his energy-based form. "You were wrong." New hyperspace rifts began opening throughout the system. But these were not collective ships emerging from the tiers in space. These were human vessels, dozens of them, appearing from all directions at once. The destroyer Retribution, burst into normal space directly above the planet, her weapons already charging. The heavy cruiser Defiant materialized near the asteroid belt, flanked by 6 escort frigates. The carrier Yorktown emerged with a full wing of fighters streaming from her launch bays. Admiral Zextel stared at the tactical display in shock. Where did they come from? Captain Chin's voice answered his unspoken question. Did you think we would send just one ship to face an empire? Earth has been preparing for this day for 50 years. We've been waiting for you. The human fleet was nothing like the Collective's formations. Where alien ships moved in perfect geometric patterns, the human vessels spread out in seemingly random arrangements. They used no standard tactics, followed no predictable formations, and they all opened fire at once. The space around Kepler 442b erupted into the largest battle the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. Human railguns spat death across the darkness. Fusion torpedoes streaked toward their targets like fallen stars. Fighter craft swarmed around the larger vessels like angry insects. The Collective fleet tried to respond with their usual overwhelming force, but the humans were ready for them. Every human ship carried armor designed to absorb energy weapons. Their hulls were layered composites that could take tremendous punishment and keep fighting. More importantly, they fought as a unit. While Collective ships operated according to rigid protocols, the human fleet moved like a living thing. Ships covered each other's flanks. Damaged vessels fell back while fresh ships took their place. Fighters coordinated with capital ships. To create devastating combined attacks, Admiral Zextel watched in growing horror as his carefully planned formations fell apart. The humans were not just fighting them. They were dismantling his fleet like engineers taking apart a machine. How do they coordinate so well? Demanded Admiral Vexcar over the communication system. They should not be able to work together. Like this, he did not understand that human military doctrine had been shaped by thousands of years of warfare. Human commanders learned to think independently while working toward common goals. They adapted to changing situations instead of following inflexible plans. The battle raged for hours. The Collective had more ships, but the humans made every shot count. They used the asteroid belt as a weapon, herding enemy vessels into the floating rocks and then triggering mining charges to create deadly debris fields. They coordinated missile strikes that overwhelmed even the strongest shields, and they never gave up. When the cruiser Manchester took critical damage, her captain rammed the ship into a Kepler bio-dreadnought, destroying both vessels in a massive explosion. When the frigate Soul ran out of ammunition, her crew used the ship itself as a weapon, ramming a Zephyrian destroyer at full speed. Admiral Zextel had never seen anything like it. In all his centuries of conquest, he had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The humans fought like beings possessed, like creatures who would rather die than surrender. Fall back, he ordered his fleet. Regroup at 10,000 kilometers, but Captain Chun was not finished. As the Collective ships tried to withdraw, the human fleet pursued them. The Indomitable, still in the lead despite her damage, closed. With the Eternal Dominion, you want to see what humans can do? Captain Chun broadcast to both fleets. Watch this. The Indomitable's main weapon began to charge, but this was not a normal railgun shot. The ship's entire power grid fed energy into the magnetic coils. Warning lights flashed red throughout the vessel as systems overloaded. Captain, warned Commander Jackson, if we fire at this power level, we'll burn out half our systems. Do it anyway, Captain Chun ordered. The railgun fired with the force of a small star going nova. The tungsten projectile accelerated to nearly 30% of light speed, struck the Eternal Dominion's shields, and kept going. It punched through the dreadnought's crystal hull, through its command center, through Admiral Zextel himself. The massive ship shuddered and began to list. Atmosphere and energy bled from the wound in its side. For the first time in its 1,000-year history, the Eternal Dominion had been seriously damaged in battle. Admiral Zextel, his energy form scattered and weakened, barely managed to maintain coherence. Impossible, he whispered. No weapon should be able to penetrate our primary shields. On the bridge of the Indomitable, sparks flew from overloaded consoles. Half the ship's systems were offline, but Captain Chun was smiling. "That's for the research station," she said quietly. The collective fleet was in chaos. Their formations had been broken. Their strongest ship was crippled. Nearly 100 vessels had been destroyed or damaged beyond repair. And still the human fleet came on, pressing their attack with relentless determination. Admiral Lexkar, aboard his own damaged flagship, stared at the tactical display in disbelief. This was not how wars were supposed to be fought. Enemies were supposed to surrender when faced with superior force. They were supposed to recognize the futility of resistance, but these humans seemed to grow stronger as the battle continued. They fought like creatures who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we're detecting more hyperspace signatures. Multiple contacts approaching from all vectors." Admiral Lexkar felt his crystal heart grow cold. More human ships? How many vessels did these creatures have? But as the new contacts emerged from hyperspace, he realized they were not human ships at all. They were vessels from a dozen different species, all converging on the battle site. The first to arrive was a fleet of Andrometal heavy cruisers, their crews seeking revenge for their homeworld's destruction 300 years ago. Behind them came Regellian battleships, followed by vessels from species the collective had thought extinct. Captain Chin's voice rang out across all frequencies again. "People of the galaxy, you have seen what the collective truly is. They are not gods, they are not invincible. They bleed and die like any other enemy. The time for fear is over. The time for freedom has begun." And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds where beings had lived in terror for millennia, the impossible began to happen. Rebellions erupted, hidden weapons were brought out of storage. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers revealed themselves to be warships. The great uprising had begun. Admiral Zexthal, struggling to keep his damaged dreadnought operational, sent an emergency transmission to Collective High Command. "This is Admiral Zexthal requesting immediate reinforcement. The humans have triggered a galaxy-wide rebellion. Repeat, we are facing a coordinated uprising across multiple sectors." The response came back within minutes, and it was not what he expected. "Admiral Zexthal, you are ordered to withdraw all collective forces to the core worlds immediately. We are implementing Protocol 7. Protocol 7. Admiral Zexthal had never thought he would hear those words. It was the collective's ultimate contingency plan, used only when facing an existential threat to their empire. They were retreating. As the collective fleet began its withdrawal, Captain Chen surveyed the battlefield. The space around Kepler 442b was filled with debris from destroyed ships. The planet itself was safe, its colonists already being evacuated by human transports, but more importantly, the galaxy had seen something it had not witnessed in 12,000 years. The Hegemony Collective had been defeated in open battle. Their myth of invincibility was shattered forever. "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres, "we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Dozens of species are declaring their independence. Hundreds of worlds are in open revolt." Captain Chun nodded. This was what they had hoped for, what they had planned for. Humanity had not come to the galaxy to conquer it. They had come to free it. "Signal all human ships," she ordered. "Begin Phase 2 operations. It's time to show the galaxy what freedom really means." In the depths of space, the wounded Indomitable led the human fleet toward their next objective. Behind them, the fires of revolution burned across 1,000 worlds. The galaxy would never be the same. News of the impossible victory at Kepler 442b spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had never dared to dream of freedom gathered around communication devices to hear the story again and again. The humans had done the impossible. They had faced the Hegemony Collective in open battle and won. In the underground cities of Proxima 7, the enslaved Talaxians whispered the name Chun like a prayer. On the factory worlds of the Vega system, Andrometal workers stopped their forced labor to look up at the stars. Even in the deepest slave pits of the Collective's core worlds, beings began to hope, But the collective's response was swift and terrible. Deep in the crystal heart of Zephyr Prime, the collective's capital world, the three supreme rulers met in emergency session. The council chamber was a place of terrible beauty, where reality itself bent to the will of the ancient beings who ruled the galaxy. Supreme ruler Thaxmer of the Zephyrians stood at the center of the crystal hall, his diamond body crackling with barely contained rage. He had lived for 8,000 years and had never known defeat. The very concept was foreign to his crystalline mind. "Explain to me," he said, his voice ringing like breaking glass, "how a single human ship destroyed 17 vessels of our First Fleet." Supreme Ruler Vexthal of the Kepler spoke next, her voice the sound of a million minds thinking as one. "The humans fight differently than any species we have encountered. They do not follow standard tactical doctrine. They adapt and change during battle." The third ruler, Supreme Velmor of the Vorthan, was a being of pure energy who existed in multiple dimensions at once. When he spoke, reality rippled around his words. More concerning is how they coordinated their fleet's arrival. Our intelligence networks detected no unusual ship movements in human space. Supreme Ruler Thaxmer's crystal features shifted into what might have been a frown. "You believe they planned this?" "I believe they have been planning this for decades," Supreme Velmor replied. "The humans have been studying us, learning our weaknesses, preparing for this moment." The revelation sent chills through the council chamber. For 12,000 years, the collective had been the hunters, and every other species had been prey. The idea that someone had been studying them, planning against them, was almost incomprehensible. "No matter," Supreme Ruler Thaxmer declared. "We will crush them as we have crushed every other challenge to our rule. Mobilize the Extinction Fleet." The other two rulers fell silent. The Extinction Fleet was the collective's ultimate weapon, a 1,000-ship armada that had ended entire civilizations. It had not been deployed in over 2,000 years, not since the final destruction of the Celestial Empire. "Is that wise?" asked Supreme Ruler Vexthal carefully. "The humans have only a few dozen ships. Surely the Extinction Fleet is excessive." "Nothing is excessive when dealing with a threat to our rule," Thaxmer replied coldly. "This human rebellion must be crushed completely. No trace of their defiance can be allowed to survive." Meanwhile, in the space around Kepler 442b, Captain Chun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched her crew work to repair the ship's damaged systems. The victory had come at a cost. Her ship was barely operational, and they had used most of their ammunition in the battle, but they were alive, and more importantly, they had sent a message to the galaxy. "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. 17 species have declared independence from the collective. 42 worlds are in open rebellion. Any word from Earth?" Captain Chun asked. "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Torres sends her congratulations. She also says to expect company soon." Captain Chun nodded. The plan was working exactly as they had hoped. Humanity had not come to the galaxy to conquer it. They had come to free it. But that would require more than one victory against a single fleet. Commander Jackson approached with a datapad in his hands. "Captain, I've been analyzing the battle recordings. I think I know why our weapons are so effective against collective ships." "Go on." "Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and exotic matter. They've never had to deal with simple kinetic rounds moving at relativistic speeds. It's like they've forgotten that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective." Captain Chun almost smiled. "They've grown complacent. 12,000 years of easy victories will do that." "There's something else," Commander Jackson continued. "Our intelligence officers have been monitoring collective communications. They're mobilizing something called the Extinction Fleet." The bridge fell silent. Everyone had heard stories of the Extinction Fleet, the massive armada that had destroyed entire star systems. It was the collective's ultimate weapon, their final answer to any threat. "How long until it arrives?" Captain Chun asked. "Best estimate is 72 hours. 3 days. Captain Chen looked around her damaged bridge, at her exhausted crew, at the scarred hull of her ship. The Indomitable had fought magnificently, but she was in no condition to face 1,000 enemy vessels. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships to prepare for immediate departure." "Where are we going, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Torres. "Home," Captain Chun replied. "We need reinforcements." But as the human fleet prepared to leave Kepler 442b, something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing at the edge of the system, but they were not collective vessels. They were refugee ships, cargo haulers, and converted civilian craft carrying beings from a dozen different species. The first to arrive was an old Andrometal freighter called the Star of Hope. Its captain, a grizzled veteran named Torvek, had fought against the collective 40 years ago and lost everything. Now he had come to join the humans in their war. "Human fleet, this is Captain Torvik of the Star of Hope. We request permission to join." "Your battle group?" More ships followed. A Rigelian hospital ship that had been converted to carry weapons. A group of Talaxian miners and modified cargo haulers. Even a few former collective vessels whose crews had mutinied and joined the rebellion. Within hours, the human fleet had grown from 30 ships to over 200. They were not all warships, and many were barely armed, but they all carried one thing in common: the desire to be free. Captain Chun found herself in command of the largest rebel fleet in galactic history. It was a responsibility she had never asked for, but one she accepted without hesitation. "Captain," said Commander Jackson, "what are your orders?" Captain Chun studied the tactical display showing all the ships now under her command. Humans, Andromedals, Rigelians, Talaxians, and a dozen other species, all united in common cause. It was the galaxy's first truly integrated fleet in 12,000 years. "We're going to make a stand," she decided. "But not here. The extinction fleet is too powerful to face in open space. We need to choose our battlefield carefully." She turned to the navigation officer. "Plot a course for the Mellan Nebula. We'll make our stand there." The Mellan Nebula was a region of space where normal sensors didn't work well, where the charged particles and electromagnetic storms could hide a fleet until the last moment. It was the perfect place for an ambush. As the rebel fleet began its journey, Captain Chen received an encrypted message from Earth. The transmission was from her old friend Admiral Torres, but there were others with her. General Morrison from the Army, Admiral Zhang from the Space Marines, and Director Walsh from Strategic Intelligence. "Sarah," Admiral Torres said, "the whole galaxy is watching. What you did at Kepler 442b has inspired revolutions on hundreds of worlds. But the collective is sending their extinction fleet to finish this." "We know," Captain Chun replied. "We're preparing for them." General Morrison leaned into view. "Sarah, Earth is sending everything we have. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier who can fight. But it will take time to get them to you." "How long?" "Minimum 6 days, probably longer." Captain Chin felt her heart sink. The extinction fleet would arrive in 3 days, but Earth's reinforcements wouldn't reach her for 6. The mathematics were brutal and simple. "Then we hold the line," she said. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we hold the line." Director Walsh spoke up. "Captain, there's something else you should know. Our intelligence networks have been monitoring collective communications. They're not just sending the extinction fleet to destroy your force. They're planning to make an example of every world that has joined the rebellion. They're going to commit genocide on a galactic scale." The words hit Captain Chun like a physical blow. Hundreds of worlds, billions of innocent beings. All of them would die if the collective was allowed to crush the rebellion. "Then we can't let them win," she said simply. Admiral Torres nodded. "We've uploaded all our tactical data on the extinction fleet to your computers. Study it well, Sarah. You're going to need every advantage you can get." The transmission ended, leaving Captain Chen alone with the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. She was no longer just fighting for the colonists of Kepler 442b. She was fighting for the freedom of every sentient being in the galaxy. 3 days later, in the swirling depths of the Mellan Nebula, the rebel fleet waited in silence. Captain Chun had positioned her ships carefully, using the nebula's natural interference to hide their exact locations. It was the best ambush she could arrange, but she knew it might not be enough. The extinction fleet, when it arrived, was larger than anything she had ever imagined. 1,000 ships of every size and configuration, from massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets to swarms of fighters that darkened the stars. At their head was the super dreadnought Annihilation, a ship so large it had multiple gravity fields and its own artificial sun. Admiral Morthic of the Zephyrians commanded the extinction fleet from the bridge of the Annihilation. He was an ancient being, older than some stars, and he had personally overseen the destruction of 73 civilizations. To him, this rebellion was just another pest to be crushed. "Deploy the fleet in standard extermination formation," he ordered. "We will sweep this nebula clean of rebel forces, then proceed to destroy every world that has dared to defy us." The extinction fleet spread out through the Mellan Nebula like a net of death. Their sensors swept through the charged particles and electromagnetic storms, searching for any sign of rebel ships. They found them. "Contact," reported the Annihilation sensor officer. "Multiple rebel vessels detected throughout the nebula. Estimated strength, 200 ships." Admiral Morthic allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 200 ships against his 1,000. The rebels had gathered every vessel they could find, but it would not be enough. Nothing could stand against the extinction fleet. "All ships, commence firing," he ordered. "Leave nothing alive." The battle for the galaxy's freedom was about to begin. The Mellan Nebula erupted into the largest battle in galactic history. 1,000 collective ships faced 200 rebel vessels in a fight that would decide the fate of every living being in the galaxy. Admiral Morthic stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Annihilation and watched his fleet spread through the nebula like a plague of metal locusts. His sensors showed rebel ships scattered throughout the charged clouds, but something felt wrong. The enemy formation made no sense. Why are they spread so thin? He wondered aloud. They should concentrate their forces to have any hope of survival. His tactical officer, a young Zephyrian named Kexvolume, studied the displays. "Perhaps they are trying to delay us, Admiral." "Make us hunt them down one by one," Admiral Morthic nodded. It was a reasonable explanation, but it felt incomplete. In his 8,000 years of warfare, he had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts told him that Captain Chun was planning something on the bridge of the Indomitable. Captain Chun watched the extinction fleet advance into her trap. The nebula's electromagnetic storms hid her ship's true positions, but more importantly, they hid something else entirely. "Report," she said quietly. Commander Jackson checked his instruments. "All minefields are in position. The automated weapons platforms are online. Our ships are ready." Captain Chun had spent 3 days turning the Mellan Nebula into the galaxy's largest killing field. Hidden throughout the charged clouds were thousands of mines, each one powerful enough to damage a capital ship. Automated weapons platforms, disguised as debris, waited for enemy ships to come within range. And scattered through it all were her ships, ready to strike from ambush. "Signal all vessels," she ordered. "Execute Phoenix Protocol." The Phoenix Protocol was humanity's most desperate battle plan. It called for every ship to fight until destruction, using themselves as weapons if necessary. There would be no retreat, no surrender, no quarter asked or given. Across the rebel fleet, captains received the signal and prepared their crews. They all knew what it meant. Most of them would not survive the next few hours. But they also knew that their sacrifice might buy freedom for the galaxy. The first collective ships to die never saw what killed them. As Admiral Morthic's advanced squadrons moved deeper into the nebula, they triggered the hidden minefields. Explosions lit up the charged clouds like deadly fireworks. Zephyrian cruisers shattered like glass. Kepler bioships screamed as they died. Vorthan energy beings were scattered across multiple dimensions. "What was that?" demanded Admiral Morthic as his tactical displays showed dozens of ships disappearing. "Unknown weapons, Admiral," reported his sensor officer. "The rebels have mined the nebula." But the mines were only the beginning. As the extinction fleet tried to regroup, the automated weapons platforms came online. They had been built by human engineers who understood that sometimes quantity was more important than quality. Each platform carried simple railguns and basic targeting systems, but there were thousands of them. The weapons platforms opened fire all at once, filling the nebula with streams of kinetic rounds. They couldn't penetrate the shields of the largest collective ships, but they didn't need to. Their job was to create chaos and confusion, to blind the enemy sensors and disrupt their formations, and in that chaos, Captain Chun struck, the Indomitable. Burst from behind a cloud of charged particles, her weapons already firing. She targeted the command ship of a Zephyrian squadron, putting 3 railgun rounds through its crystal hull before it could react. The explosion lit up half the nebula. All around the battlefield, rebel ships emerged from hiding. They struck fast and hard, then disappeared back into the electromagnetic storms before the enemy could respond. It was guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. Admiral Morthic watched his carefully planned formation fall apart. The rebels were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They ignored his heavy ships and concentrated on his scouts and communications vessels. They used hit-and-run tactics that made it impossible to bring his superior firepower to bear. "All ships, close formation," he ordered. "Do not let them separate us." But Captain Cheen had anticipated this move. As the extinction fleet tried to pull together, she triggered the second phase of her plan. Hidden throughout the nebula were not just mines and weapons platforms, but something else entirely. Human engineers had spent months building them in secret, using salvaged materials and pure determination. They were not elegant or beautiful. They were simple, brutal, and effective. They were kamikaze drones. 1,000 unmanned ships suddenly appeared throughout the nebula, all of them on collision courses with collective vessels. They were little more than engines and fusion reactors, but they moved faster than anything in the extinction fleet. Admiral Morthic stared in horror as his tactical display filled with incoming contacts. "What are those things?" He got his answer when the first drone struck one of his dreadnoughts. The fusion reactor detonated on impact, creating a miniature star that consumed everything within a kilometer radius. The dreadnought, which had survived battles against entire civilizations, simply ceased to exist. More explosions followed. The kamikaze drones struck without warning, without mercy, without fear. They were machines programmed with one simple command: destroy the enemy at any cost. In the space of minutes, Admiral Morthic lost over 100 ships, 100 vessels, each one worth more than most star systems, destroyed by what amounted to flying bombs. "This is madness," he raged. "How can they sacrifice so much for so little gain?" He did not understand that sacrifice was the foundation of human military doctrine. Every human child learned the stories of soldiers who gave their lives to save others. Every human officer was taught that some things were worth dying for, but the drones were only a distraction. While the extinction fleet struggled to deal with the kamikaze attacks, Captain Chun was preparing her real surprise. Deep in the heart of the nebula, hidden behind layers of electromagnetic interference, waited the largest ship in the rebel fleet. It was not a warship at all, but a converted mining vessel called the New Horizon. Its captain, Sarah Martinez, had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in galactic history. The New Horizon carried no weapons and no armor. Instead, its cargo holds were filled with antimatter. Enough antimatter to power a small star. Enough antimatter to crack a moon. Enough antimatter to destroy everything within 100 kilometers. "New Horizon to Indomitable," Captain Martinez transmitted. "Package is ready for delivery." Captain Chun felt her heart clench. Sarah Martinez had a wife and 2 children back on Earth. She was throwing her life away for people she had never met, for a galaxy that had barely known humans existed. "Understood, New Horizon, you are cleared for final approach." The converted mining ship began its run toward the center of the extinction fleet, toward the massive super dreadnought Annihilation. Its engines burned at maximum power, pushing the vessel faster than it had ever been designed to go. Admiral Morthic saw the incoming ship on his sensors, but he did not understand what it represented. It looked like a simple cargo vessel, probably trying to flee the battle. He barely bothered to order his point defenses to fire at it. But Captain Chin knew exactly what was happening. She opened the channel to every ship in both fleets, her voice carrying across the entire nebula. "People of the galaxy, hear me. For 12,000 years you have lived in fear. You have bowed to tyrants who claim to be gods. You have accepted slavery because you thought there was no alternative." The New Horizon pushed deeper into the extinction fleet, taking hit after hit from collective weapons. Its hull began to glow from the energy impacts, but Captain Martinez held her course. "Today that ends," Captain Chun continued. "Today we show you that gods can bleed, that tyrants can fall. That freedom is always worth fighting for, no matter the cost." Admiral Morthic finally realized what was happening. The cargo ship was not fleeing. It was attacking. And if the readings from his sensors were correct, it was carrying enough antimatter to destroy his entire command squadron. "All ships, focus fire on that cargo vessel," he ordered desperately. "Destroy it before it reaches us." But it was too late. The New Horizon had already penetrated too deeply into the fleet. Collective ships tried to fire on it, but they risked hitting their own vessels. The formation that Admiral Morthic had ordered to protect his fleet now trapped them. Captain Martinez's voice crackled over the communication system one last time. "For freedom," she said simply. The New Horizon's antimatter payload detonated at the heart of the extinction fleet. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, a new star born in the depths of the Mellan Nebula, the Super Dreadnought. Annihilation, which had destroyed countless worlds, vanished in the first microsecond. 50 other ships died with it, including Admiral Morthic and most of his command staff. The remaining collective fleet was thrown into chaos. Their formation was shattered, their command structure destroyed, their morale broken. For the first time in their history, the extinction fleet was in full retreat, but Captain Chun was not finished. As the surviving collective ships tried to flee, the rebel fleet pursued them. Human ships, Andrometal cruisers, Rigelian destroyers, and vessels from a dozen other species, all united in their hunger for freedom. The battle continued for 18 more hours, ranging across multiple star systems as the rebels hunted down every collective ship they could find. When it finally ended, less than 100 ships escaped from the original 1,000-ship extinction fleet. Captain Chun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking out at the debris field that had once been the galaxy's most powerful fleet. Her ship was barely holding together, her crew was exhausted, and she had lost more friends than she could count. But they had won. "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds are declaring independence. The remaining collective fleets are withdrawing to their core systems." "Any word from Earth?" "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Torres says the relief fleet will arrive in 6 hours. They're bringing supplies, reinforcements, and new orders." Captain Chun nodded. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The collective still controlled hundreds of worlds and millions of ships. It would take years to drive them back to their home systems, and years more to help the liberated worlds rebuild. But for the first time in 12,000 years, the galaxy had hope. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Stand down from battle. Alert, begin rescue operations for any survivors." Commander Jackson looked surprised. "Even collective survivors, Captain?" "Especially collective survivors," Captain Chun replied. "We're not like them. We don't murder prisoners or genocide entire species. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us better." As the rebel fleet began the grim task of searching for survivors among the wreckage, a new message spread across the galaxy. It was simple and brief, but it carried more power than any weapon. The Hegemony Collective has been defeated. The galaxy is free. On 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at the stars and dared to dream of a better future. The age of tyranny was ending, the age of freedom had begun. And at the center of it all, a battered human ship limped home, carrying the news that would change everything. Humanity had kept its promise. They had held the line. the galaxy would never be the same.